Welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bytecast, where tech and business collide. Get expert insights, real-world strategies, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead, stay secure, and explore what's beyond the firewall. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining another episode of the Business Bytecast, your Beyond the Firewall, where we try to bridge technology and businesses and see what's coming up in the industry. Always exciting and always interesting. I'm glad and really privileged to have AJ today, President and CEO of Daylite. Daylite's one of the world's leading Apple CRM and productivity tools that have been around now for many years, and they are pretty much the best product that I've seen on the market when it comes to Apple-centric type of solutions. Thank you for joining us, AJ.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was real pleasure, and I'm glad that we're finally able to get this booked up for our show.
Yeah.
How are things going on over there?
Well, they're going pretty good. The world and the markets are up and down, but generally speaking, they're doing okay. Better than I expected, actually.
Amazing. And for those that are new listeners and those that are not familiar with it, what is Daylite? Daylite is obviously a unique industry product, and I'd like to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so what we did with our product is we kind of combined the intent when we built the product, or as we're building the product, because it never ends, is to help small businesses grow. And in order to accomplish that, any kind of small business, you need a CRM. You need your contact management, you need activity history, all that kind of stuff. And then the next thing that you need on top of that is the day-to-day productivity. So, your tasks, your appointments, your meetings, your notes, all that kind of stuff. So we combine those things into one app, native app, with local data that we synchronize in the background. And we cater to companies 1 to 100 in size, and specifically to people that sell services or expertise, right? So we got a lot of consultants, we got real estate folks, we got lawyers in the U.S., a lot of lawyers in the U.S. And so those are people that are selling their expertise and time. And when they're selling, they need to build a relationship. It's not a transactional kind of, I'm buying a widget or whatever. It's a long relationship before a deal is made. And then when the deal is made, it can last for a period of time. And then they can go and come back and all this kind of stuff. So we help. That's where we shine, so to speak. And then we've made it a native app with local data, so you can be anywhere, work, have full access to your data. And when the network comes back up, we synchronize and off we go. So a lot of the things that the latest web apps are trying to accomplish with offline first or offline access in the browser, we kind of do with a native app.
Right. Okay. That's cool. And when we talk about that, native, so we're talking about like iPhone, iPad, and Mac proper.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. And have you guys evolved also into a web-based platform, or is it exclusively for local data?
So we have everything. So it's multi-user, by the way, right? And so we have a cloud-based backend. We have full, you have access via API, webhooks, all these kinds of stuff for integrations. And slowly over time, you'll see more and more features, web features appear that work synergistically with the native application.
That's amazing. Yeah, because like when you look at the internet today, there's a plethora of options out there, and usually it's very confusing to identify, which platform to kind of go with, because obviously everybody's usually featuring or sort of highlighting their wow factor and or efficiency factor, or trying to showcase how employees are loving their technology. I would say, what outside of being Mac centric, is there any other unique value proposition or any other unique functionality that your platform has to offer these days?
Well, there are a couple of unique things. So number one, remember I was telling you about productivity. We actually started with that, right? And then we built a CRM on top of that. So not only do we deal with opportunities, which is the sales side, right? We also have projects, which is the execution side. So when I say projects, it's more like project tracking rather than project management. But
Sure.
typically, the kinds of customers we have with that size that I was mentioning, right? It's not so much that you need detailed project plans or anything like that. It's that you need a unit of work where everybody can link their documents, they can link their tasks and their appointments and so forth, and that relates back to the customer because that becomes part of history eventually, right? So one of the things we do unique as compared to most CRMs out there, in fact, I only know one or two that have both opportunities and projects. We do that. That's unique. And our way of integrating with mail is also unique. So we have our own native mail application inside of Daylite. So you just connect to your IMAP or Outlook, etc. And um, you can then pick what ends up going into Daylite. So not everything goes into Daylite. So what you see typically is a BCC kind of idea where emails are BCC'd into a project or BCC'd into an account, so to speak. In our case, email comes in. We look at the context that we have in Daylite. We can surface the ones that you should be dealing with first, right? And then because this you get tons of email, a lot of it is junk, right?
Correct.
Or not relevant. It may not be junk. You may have a junk filter or whatever, but it may not be relevant. And what you should be dealing with is the ones that are important to you, meaning the ones that contacts that you do have that you may have some opportunities or projects to open with. So we do that kind of stuff. So that's another kind of piece, unique piece in terms of what we do different. And so those things and the productivity side are the unique elements of what we have and part of our secret sauce, so to speak.
Well, that's a huge benefit right there. The fact that you're on a native mail service as part of the integrated. And yeah, I can think of several project management platforms out there on the web. They do a lot of marketing and a lot of advertising on the web, but none of them really talk about being a CRM system. So the fact that you're bridging sort of a trifecta of features there, it gives that end user a much better experience. And I think that must bring some significant value to the end user, especially if you're a Mac centric business.
Yeah, it does, and that's why customers when we ask them, periodically we'll survey, and one of the first questions is, do you still want offline sync? Do you still value offline sync? Because as we think, there's more and more connectivity and so forth. So why would you care about offline sync? And it's expensive for us. It's not easy technology to make synchronization, multi-user synchronization work. And they come back with, yeah, don't get rid of that because that's one of the reasons I'm with you. And then the
Right.
other stuff is the other reasons they're with us is our mail integration. That's another one.
Yeah.
Um, and then the fact that the various bits are all together in one place. Um, so there's less chance of things falling through the cracks, so to speak.
Interesting. So, yeah, that was going to be my next question is like, so this is the key factor of what businesses are looking for, or are there different needs that businesses out there are struggling with where either your product or within the industry are being addressed? Like I see a lot of businesses, we service a lot of businesses. I think, every day I'm seeing a new client or I'm seeing an existing client
Mm-hmm.
that, they're challenged on figuring out how to make sense of all this information. And, it seems like a lot of solutions out there are siloed.
Yes.
You got your, let's use the big names like, like a Salesforce solution. And then they've got, this email agent. They've got like, the 365 or G Suite. They've got another product tool for, project management. And so, what do you see as one of the biggest challenges for small business? Again, speaking to the market of the 1 to 100 users, what are businesses looking for today?
So one of the things that starts to happen as soon as you go to adding the second user, right, is this issue of information is spread out across different places. And it could be on, that second user could be, they're managing their contacts slightly differently and they're doing that differently and so forth. So you have now, institutional knowledge that's being spread across two different things. So you want to unify them. So that's now you take that and it's a microcosm of another problem, which is okay, sure, we can now have shared applications like Salesforce, like etc. Right? But then what happens is the next level is that the information is spread out over different applications, right?
Mm,
And there's some critical, like you can't have everything in one place. That's not totally realistic, right? Like in terms of all your business information. But you need to have that critical mass of information in one place so that it's A, kept up to date, and B, easy to access and linked to the customer, right? So that's what we do, right? We for example, we're not an accounting package. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. But you can link out to that in one place. So when another employee is looking for, look at a customer record, they
Yeah.
can see that information all in one place, right? That at least there's a link out to more detailed information for that customer with the specific link.
And is your product an open architecture type of thing where if I'm using not just Google and Microsoft, but like another repository between Slack and other sort of frameworks out there, are you able to aggregate some of the data references and being able to pull all that into one place? Because I'm seeing a lot of challenge right now that companies are using, Dropbox and using Google Drive, and, they may have another vendor, another client that's got say marketing material or some contracts that they need to keep within their framework.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to either connect or link or somehow make reference of all that so it's an easier experience?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the advantages of being a native app. We work with what they call file providers on the Mac, right? Where you
Okay.
can, for example, Dropbox can be a file provider, Box, Google Drive, etc. Right? And they're mounted on your file system, and you link out to that, and we recognize that, and then so we work with that. We don't have to do anything special because it's just available on the platform, and we just leverage the APIs that Apple gives us that abstracts all those different file providers from us, so we don't have to worry so much about it.
Interesting. Interesting.
It's
Um,
similar with some of the AI stuff too, because Apple's providing us with tooling on the AI front, and we're able to leverage some of that too. We haven't released some of this stuff, so it's a little bit forward looking here. We're able to leverage the foundation models that Apple's shipping now with the latest OS. Do some stuff there. You're using your local compute, right,
right.
and offer you some value in the application using that compute power, right?
Interesting.
So again, that's native because it's on the platform. We get to leverage it because we're a native app. It's much more difficult to do that with a web app.
Yeah, so you're not actually having to build out an AI solution that's agnostic to just your solution. Leveraging everything that's going to be an Apple technology will now be a native solution, fully integrated, and you're going to get the best of both worlds without having to build all that out, which is quite unique.
Yeah, and I mean it's advantageous. It's not that we won't have to do some AI stuff in the back. We will,
Right.
um, but at least we can leverage what Apple's providing us on the platform.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was just using what's that Perplexity browser comment, and that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool because, like, if you're on that platform, you can tell it to do things for you, and if as long as it's web based, it has the ability to do some functionality within its own browser.
Yeah.
I saw somebody create like a playlist. So, you're logged into your Spotify account and you're like, oh, create for me my next workout routine playlist. And it'll just automatically go into your Spotify account through the browser
Mm-hmm.
and create, let's call it a playlist for as long as you want it to based on
Right.
your request. So Spotify doesn't have the solution, but using that browser sort of plugin, but it's still limited in function and it won't do business applications from what I saw. Again, I'm sure that's going to advance, and that could be a massive disruptor when we look at nobody's really challenged Chrome for quite some time, and
Right.
we'll see what Google does with Gemini and Chrome, or the new version of Chrome with built-in Gemini. Who knows when that's going to get released, or maybe I've missed it and it's there.
Right. Yeah, it's moving
But
fast, isn't it?
yeah, it's just like, oh, you didn't see that update last week? Oh, what are you talking about? Like, maybe in the last 24 hours, like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. So it's interesting you brought up AI. And AI is always a big conversation today. We know it's in its infancy. It's definitely not in maturity yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, How do you see AI evolving your market space and how business operates between both CRM and project management and all of the tools that your system provides? Because I see a lot of demand today when it comes to like building out agentic agents and trying to do this within the Microsoft or Google framework, and there's a lot of hurdles within that, and I think that that is a big challenge for most businesses. What's your take on that?
So before we go there, let's talk a little bit about MCP servers or this MCP kind of thing, right? Because I think that's one of the toolings that will enable some interesting integrations and interesting automations and so forth. Because ultimately, when we're talking about, basic business software, right? Um, there's there's information in different places that you want to kind of work with across the things, but integrating things is not easy. There's a lot of stuff. So I have a feeling that MCP servers, if they is that how the right term? I think that's the right term. MCP servers
Yeah.
are going to be important. What's your take on that? I mean, you're probably seeing some of that when you're deploying some of this stuff with your or experimental stuff with your customers. Are you deploying any MCP servers?
Ironically, most small businesses are not investing that far down into that infrastructure stuff. I would say that that's moving up the customer size base. I think companies that, are slightly larger are investing into that kind of infrastructure, at
Mm-hmm.
least in Canada.
All right.
I would say that most businesses today that I'm seeing sub 100 users are still getting their feet wet when it comes to using Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, and maybe some other, call it pre-built or canned solutions out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see major capital investments around any of those types of infrastructures yet.
That's interesting. I would have expected that you'd be hearing a lot more about that. Which is, I think that's one of the pieces that will come into play when it comes to, what do businesses want out of, uh, even if you think of less than 500 people companies, right? Like even slightly bigger. Less enterprise. I'm not too familiar with that space too much, but when we're talking about that, I think that this kind of tech will come in handy because with an MCP server, you can clearly identify certain rules. You can put guardrails in there versus, for example, if you have you want to do some AI integration between different services and you're using their REST API, it can be difficult to work with. But with an MCP server and where you're defining what tools are available and what you can do, I see it becoming a lot more fluid or a lot easier to integrate. It's still, like you said, it's still early in the infancy, but I have a feeling that that's going to play an important.
Well, I think so too. I think, when you look at what's coming down the pipe, we're all going to want our own database. We're all going to want our data infrastructure. Um, we got rid of the servers moving to the cloud, but I think that having that unified approach may not work for everybody, and having that custom resource within their own framework, these servers will come into effect as the products evolve and mature. I know that the larger organizations that I work with, I'm talking bigger organizations
Yeah.
in the hundreds and thousands of employees, they've already invested and already are building out some sort of server AI infrastructure in their own ecosystem. So
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
happening. But I think also costs are inhibitive because these servers are not cheap today to get them off the ground.
No, 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 no. Which is exactly why I'm happy that Apple's putting these foundation models out that I can use it on device, which is local compute rather than me paying for tokens on the back end,
Yeah,
because that can get very costly, right?
yeah. I believe if you want to buy and build out your own MCP server, you're talking astronomical dollars. It's not like a $5,000 box sitting in your office.
Well, it depends. It again depends really like what you're implementing in your MCP server. You can keep it pretty bare bones and light. Um, uh, basically a front end to your REST API, but in AI friendly kind of format.
Right.
Um, and so it can range. It can range.
Yeah. Yeah, no, zero debate on that. I think everybody, like I said, is on my end of the world. I think most customers in the space, and we cross a lot of industries. So from manufacturing to professional services, I think
Right.
legal and accounting, I think some of those organizations are trying to find a solution. Some of them are relying on their industry experts to come out with a unified platform.
Mm-hmm.
I think major law firms, for example, are building out their own, but the smaller law firms and smaller accounting firms of 10, 20 users are not going to dove into that. I think they're going to be looking for somebody to sort of present them with a pre-built package so that they can kind of do it for them, kind of thing, like a full solution versus them building out their own. So that's my projections.
Right.
But it's a tough one. Like, which way do you go and which way do you tackle it? Because you're trying to use the native tools, you're trying to come up with some sort of agentic agent
Mm-hmm.
using like a Microsoft Studio or something along those lines. Then you've got industry applications that are out there, Clio, Cosmolex, and
Right.
several others out there. So they're, I'm assuming, coming out with some sort of AI or agentic platform add-on, and everyone's going to be trying to figure out where that goes. So that's just speaking in that sector. I think when you look at each vertical, it's going to have its own challenge and unique proposition there. So
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about, you were mentioning law firms. And so, and then, the larger ones building out their own kind of AI tooling, I guess. And so when I think of law and I think of LLMs, I think, what about the hallucinations, right? Or is the I don't know if anybody has found a way to, I'm not aware, at least maybe it is out there, a way to um, make sure that they're not hallucinating case law, or
yep,
the engine is not hallucinating case law, because it's so far it's happened a few times. We've seen public scorn, well, not judges, calling out various attorneys on this, that you're mentioning case law that does not exist.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that is going to be an interesting path, and I don't know if I've spoken about this on my show before, but we are moving to a generation where, let's call it, a lot of the admin work is going to be now moving towards agents or
Hmm.
agentic AI.
Right.
And so when we look at, hey, I'm an accountant, I do intake forms, I process, T4s all day long during tax seasons. Can I get an agent to help me do like what Quick Tax used to do? Where you put in all your numbers and it sort of generates your generic, your business filing. I'm already going to assume that that's going to become an agentic agent of some sort
Hmm.
for both individuals and for practice. How is that going to be vetted? How is that going to be verified? We're still going to need people with brain cells and real body people to actually take a look at it to verify the knowledge. So the experts are still going to need to be around.
Well, I
Um,
think that there's going to be more demand on experts,
yes.
more than ever, because we're now producing more data. If we were producing a lot of data prior to 2023, with OpenAI kind of opening the ChatGPT opening the door there, we're producing way more data right now, right? And
Hmm.
so, um, what's going to happen with all this data? Because some of it is not true, right?
Yes.
Some of it is made
Correct.
up, right? So how do you different? How do you distinguish? And this is one of the things that makes my head spin a little bit when it comes to the amount of stuff that we're able to generate now. Because I can go into, I use Claude more than I use OpenAI. I'm able. I got this kind of little thing. Can you spit out some document for me? And a couple of minutes later, I have this thing that I'm reviewing, and it's great because it really helps. But there is obviously some wrong stuff in there. But now I'm able to kind of filter that out. So when you're doing this agentic stuff, how do you, like you mentioned, how are we going to vet this, right? This
Yeah.
is this. I'm a little bit puzzled by that one. I'm sure there'll be a great solution coming up, but I don't, in my mind, I can't fathom it right now.
And it's a very interesting challenge because what I'm hearing rumbling in the background is companies are cutting back on certain staff, certain resources. They're streamlining their operations. They're getting to a point now that it's less and less, And the question now is who's going to get trained on the next generation if you're going to be short on these experts? And how are these people going to be coming out of university to get trained up to become experts?
Mm-hmm.
When that first one or two layers of work is going to be displaced by 80% AI. Where is that going to be where, I just graduated from school. AI now does all of the L1, L2, let's call it administrative work, articling, basic functions of most businesses from an administration standpoint. And all of a sudden, you literally have to go from school to matter expert because all that in between is going
Mm-hmm.
to be basically built out in some way, shape, or form through AI. And that's
Yeah.
mind boggling when you really think about a 5 year or 10 year roadmap. It's pretty disturbing on how that's going to be remediated.
Yeah, I think there are certain parts. Okay, so if we really think about LLMs and AI, so we have to kind of also distinguish between ML and LLMs, right? Machine learning and large language models. And so ML is meant to be repeatable and predictable and uh, mathematically sound,
Mm.
and LLMs are not, right? There's this fuzzy factor in there, and it's really an algorithm that helps you predict the next word within a context. So there's no real logic or reasoning there. It's just based on prior data, right? And so I think that's going to help certain types of industries, but not all.
Right.
And I think what we're learning now, what we're going through the next this last little while, and in the next year or two or whatever, is going to be the us teasing out where these LLMs are really useful and helpful and actually beneficial versus where they either shift the work somewhere else, or they don't help. So I can give you an example in our case when it comes to code about how LMs actually made us less productive.
Wow.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, I got to know more about that.
So, um, so we had a project, like one of the features that we're working on, and we had a couple of people, that we kind of got from another company to help us with this particular thing, and they were very pro AI, and so we said, great, let's give it a shot. Let's see how far we can. We weren't really thinking about it in those terms at that time, but we were, we need this feature, we need it fast. It's a complex feature. Let's use as much LLM as we can. And what started happening as the feature, the scope of the feature is the feature, but as you're building the feature, there's more and more scope of work. There's more code, basically, right? Um, and what started happening was the LLM would adjust the code because we needed, okay, well, this is not working, let's fix that, etc. This actually needs to happen here. We're missing that particular step, and it needed to refactor the code, obviously, as an engineer would do normally, and reorganize things. And what it ended up doing is it started opening these large PRs that are 7,000 lines, for example, which takes somebody a lot of time to review, right? And it was then altering in very subtle ways previously proven bits of code, right? So so not only was the review process much longer than before, it was actually introducing subtle bugs, because again, there's no logic per se. It's next word prediction based on whatever, right? So we ended up that project which should have been done by now is now delayed by about probably 60 days, because we have to kind of have a human go through it again, clean it up, and make it work again. Right. So it shifted. What it did is it shifted the work to the reviewer from the coder. Right. And then it introduced these subtle bugs, which and these different things that and because the PRs are so big, you missed it.
Yeah.
Right. So it should be really small chunks that build on top of another. So what we learned out of that process is the way you use AI, the way it's currently being talked about, is actually not very, like, after at a certain point you tip over the scale and you're not productive anymore. You're actually unproductive. So it's shifting the weight somewhere else.
Right.
And I recently saw a CNBC article on AI slop, right? And I'll share the link with you. And it talks about how other places they've seen a reduction in productivity because of this exact type of same problem. That, I mean, in different industries it's different, right? But in our industry, in coding and writing software, that's how it manifested itself. So there
That's
you're
interesting.
seeing this, and what I think is happening is we're finding out it's great at this stuff. It's not so great at this stuff.
Right. And I guess that goes down to the MIT report that came out a couple of weeks ago about how 95% or over 90% of AI projects are failing. Maybe that's partially to relate to that, where, things are just not really panned out to what it's being advertised, and it does stuff, but
Yeah.
not well. And it was funny you mentioned about programming and coding. One of the challenges that I've heard about using AI for coding is, how well is it going to manage security? How well is it going to
Ooh.
manage, like, you can build a website apparently in like a matter of minutes using one
Yeah.
of these platforms. How secure is it? How robust is the, reliability of it? I don't think it really factors in or thinks about what the ramifications of how it codes. And so it could be just completely with holes everywhere. And now you got to have somebody go back, and your QA guy, is going to now spend double the amount of time because everything has to be scrutinized because it doesn't meet certain
Mm-hmm.
frameworks and whatnot. So it's interesting, hearing from you firsthand that, AI has been a failure to some extent in this department. Yet, you hear on the other side of the spectrum all the success stories of what it can do. And I always like to say, with new technology, you got to take a grain of salt, because there's certain things I find that, yeah, I ask it to do more basic function stuff for me as a business owner. Hey, help me prepare a PowerPoint presentation, help me draft a letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still going through it, but it helps me create the core of the
Yeah, it
presentation.
gets the wheel turning. It gets the
Correct.
wheel turning.
Yeah, but it still requires me to do all the final touches on it, because if I relied on it to do all of it on its own, I would be like, no, I couldn't present this to anybody. It's
Yeah.
useless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you're actually first person on my show to actually kind of indicate the failures and where it's not meeting some of those gaps.
Yeah,
Those
it's
sort of
it's
wish
it's
lists.
like a learning experience. Like we went through this, we now know a little bit better on how to manage that. Like, for example, reject a 7,000 line PR. But as I was saying earlier, I think we're finding out where it can be helpful. So yesterday, for example, I was at a meetup, and we were talking about coding and AI. And this one gentleman kind of made two agents that one was an interview agent and the other one was a architecture agent. And what the interview agent did purpose was to interview him to get the specs out of his head and to make design documents, not code, but design documents that basically got the user stories or the spec out from his head, and in a nice kind of way. So that was very useful. And then from that he said, okay, now the second agent, take these requirements that has been now nicely put together for you, and help me figure out an architecture for this. And then from that, he broke it down into much smaller pieces. Obviously, that's the purpose of the architecture. And then for each module, so a module is one of the components. You have maybe 20 or 30 of those, right? Each one of those is another document that's produced, and that document talks about exactly what that module should do. And then he would get AI to work on just that one piece to generate the code and a test file as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have the design document, you have the actual code, and you have a test that kind of says validates basically the thing. And he's been successful with it. But what he's have to do is he has to shepherd this this process from extracting the requirements and breaking it down, and then helping design an architecture around it, then going and on those small bits making design documents for those to specify exactly what those components should do, what those modules should do, and then also spitting out a test that validates that the code does what the design document is requiring. So that
So
was
kind
an
of like,
interesting process. That was like, so I see how you're getting useful out of this is this breakdown into like really small bits, and then you're very specific about what you need and want.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're micromanaging AI versus,
You
micromanaging
are
employees.
you are doing that, but this is also true. Like when you're managing, like any project that you're building, you do have to break it down. Even if
Yeah.
you're talking to humans, and one human will be responsible for this piece. You got to be very specific because how to make sure that it fits in the rest of the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So instead of micromanaging humans, we're micromanaging our AI agents and
Yeah.
models. And
Yeah.
you're literally doing the same business model of silos of teams now into AI models, and you're micromanaging those models. It's a cool concept, and it actually makes sense because then it's more controllable, and you can kind of stop before it gets to be problematic, which I think
Yeah.
is smart. So, you know, I'd love to see what you got here. So, like, we are in the end of 2025. AI is all over the place in the sense of the news, media, cybersecurity. There's a bit of a, call it a bit of a transition with employees. I know in Canada, a lot of companies are moving back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Major corporations are bringing everybody, if not 100%, close to 100% back to work.
Mm-hmm.
What, and because you're dealing with a lot of businesses in that space of small business, what do you see as projections for the 2026 market? Like, what are your, what do you see coming down the pipe, both from a technology, what customers are going to be demanding, what industry is going to be demanding? What's your sort of, let's call it highlight reel of what's coming down the pipe?
So I think there's a few things there to unpack. So on the AI front, as we were talking earlier, the fork kind of appearing of where AI is very useful and where it's not so much. I think in 2026 we're going to by the end of 2026 we'll have a much better idea as compared to what we have now, right? We'll also have probably some best practices. Like for example, this last little conversation about breaking the pieces down.
Mm-hmm.
On leveraging AI within those forks where it's good, right? And then that will by the end of the year. So some of the heavy investment that's being made in AI, I think will kind of not go down, but it's not going to increase at the rate it's been increasing this last year. Like in terms of all these, I'm going to buy this many units of compute because I need these many tokens kind of stuff. I think it's gonna it's gonna level off a little bit. I don't think
Right.
it's gonna go down. I think it's
No.
gonna level off. So that's what I see in AI with much more clarity of what's going on, because now you're seeing what you're seeing with the various updates of Claude or ChatGPT and the various models like Olama and Sonnet and all these things, is you're seeing we've hit like a point where it's just incremental improvements. There's no major breakthroughs coming out,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is the application of what we have coming out that's becoming more clear. Like, for example, this Sora thing that OpenAI just released last week or what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example of them finding something that is quite useful. It happens to be, of course, with videos, and I'm sure somebody will find a way to monetize that nicely for business. That's what's going to happen in 2026 for AI. Now, in terms of the next question, which was return to the office, that's interesting because I think what people are realizing is that being in person is. I don't think it's about micromanaging as much. I think it's about like we are talking about kids coming out of college or university, and then how do they have to become experts all of a sudden, right? What I think I've learned and I've seen other people learn is that when kids come out of college, they need to learn from other humans by watching them, by being watched, etc. And you can't do that remotely very well. Like it's
Correct.
terrible. It's just not, it doesn't work. So how are you going to even raise the next generation of employees or workforce, really, right? When they are not, how are they learning? They can't learn so much remotely. So what I'm finding, for example, in my organization, is that the young, like I used to leverage co-op students and new grads a lot. That was basically how we built the company. Now I can't do that anymore because we're fully remote at the moment, right? Where I can't do that anymore.
Mhm.
But what I am finding is that the young families, the folks that are just had a kid or two or three or whatever, so the people in that 15-year kind of window from
Mhm.
when they have their first child to when their eldest one is about, or their youngest one is about 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there, those folks do well in a remote environment because to them the trade-off of commute and then dropping the kids to school and then picking them up and taking them to activity, they're willing to make things work there, and their
Mhm.
their life is hectic. And then there's the empty nesters where the kids have gone and they're lonely at home, they want to be with people.
That's right.
So you got these two segments there that actually need to be with other people, where the work from at the office would be beneficial and be more productive than if you're remote. And then that middle segment where they really like the fact that they're remote because of life, right? Um, but the that doesn't solve the problem of being together, having discussion, breaking bread, building the relationships. You got to do that in person. Like that just doesn't happen remotely very well. Like, I mean, it's possible, but it's difficult, and only the rare few do that well.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you on that. I think that when we look at, and it's funny because I'm reading it and I'm seeing it a lot more in publications and at conferences about culture. They're starting to bring back that terminology about your corporate culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard when everybody's remote. What kind of culture are you having really? Just everyone does their own thing, everybody works. And then
Yeah,
you have like what, team huddles once a week. There's none of that, coffee talk. There's none of the lunch crowds going out and
yeah.
collaborating and, having fun with each other kind of thing. And sure, you can throw together, a quarterly dinner and everybody just shows up to say hi to each other. And I'm like, oh, this is what you look like.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get together and do some fun things. But it is a challenge, especially when I look at graduating students, where we were also a very heavy, call it youth oriented, because we want the best talent and we usually try to find the up and coming.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. It's very hard when you're 100% remote. And fortunately, in our industry, we don't have that luxury. So we still have that office. But at the end of the day, we do have people now that work with our firm globally. So I don't think there's a magic wand or some sort of secret recipe. I think we all have to kind of figure out our own kind of journey when it comes to
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
make that happen. EJ, I want to thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me on.
Really exciting about having you on it and talking about not only about project management, productivity, and CRM. But we completely transitioned to AI and how this is going to be like how the success and failure around AI. And I didn't even expect it to go that route. So thank you so much for being on our show. It was great having you today. Look forward to having you back at some point in time. And everybody
Absolutely.
that's listening, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and follow and tell all your friends about our show. We're always excited about coming out with great new ideas. So if you have any requests about our next show, please reach out to us or send us a message. We're available on all social media platforms. Looking forward to hearing from you again. AJ, hopefully we'll get you back on another episode. Thank you so
Would love to.
much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.